On January 12th of 2017, Nintendo would release a trailer in which they would formally announce one of their biggest projects yet, Super Mario Odyssey. Except this time, we'd be embarking on a vastly different adventure compared to what we are used to seeing in 3D Mario games. An adventure that no one could have ever anticipated. It's no secret that Super Mario Odyssey is arguably one of the best Mario games of all time, whether it be for its kingdoms, moveset, atmosphere, speedruns, secrets, music, and so much more. But what made the game so special to people, and does it still hold that same euphoric feeling almost 6 years later? Soon after the release of Super Mario 3D World in 2013, Nintendo's Entertainment Planning and Development Division began development on what would eventually be Super Mario Odyssey. Nintendo wanted this game to be massive, with the intention of appealing to both their casual and non-casual audiences. So in an attempt to encapsulate everyone's attention, they created a sandbox-like game. Now if you've played a lot of Mario games, you'll know that there are staple worlds in each Mario game, whether it be your typical World 1 or your typical lava-based world. Alongside these staple worlds, there are staple boss fights, power-ups, moves, and even a staple atmosphere. Now, of course, Mario games in the past have stepped outside of their formula. I mean, just look at Super Mario Galaxy or Super Mario Sunshine. But when it comes to Super Mario Odyssey, the development team put a heavy emphasis on the element of surprise. Not only did they want to give players something new, but they wanted to shock the world with ideas that had never seen the light of day in any other Mario game. So when it came to designing the world of Odyssey, they pulled inspiration from all different directions. Instead of the first kingdom being your typical grass level, you are placed in this gloomy and monochromatic kingdom that is filled with hat-like architecture, whether it be these small lamps or this big hat tower that you are able to traverse through. Speaking of which, Nintendo had to think of how Mario would traverse through each individual kingdom, which is when they started drawing inspiration for Mario's moveset from other Mario games, whether it be the dive, long jump, and backflip that we're used to seeing in SM64, or a similar twirl to that of Super Mario Sunshine. While we got some more classic levels like Cascade Kingdom or Sand Kingdom, there are plenty of outliers like Cap Kingdom, whether it be Ruined Kingdom, where you're quite literally fighting this massive dragon in this broken down and desolate castle, or we have the Moon Kingdom. But out of the 16 kingdoms in this game, there's one kingdom that Nintendo went all out on when it came to developing Odyssey into the game that it is today. A kingdom that none of us could even imagine being a reality back then. This kingdom would be none other than the Metro Kingdom. This large city, of course, takes inspiration from New York City, whether it be the giant skyscrapers and buildings, or even just the name of the city being New Donk City. From the underground power plant to the Empire State Building inspired City Hall, this kingdom is jam-packed with references and is truly a testament to how much passion Nintendo put into this game. As Nintendo is outlining how they would turn this almost dreamlike game into a reality, there was one question that they needed to answer for themselves. They had their ideas for Mario's moveset, as well as what the world would look like around them, but what would be the iconic gimmick this time around, and how would this gimmick be used to create a unique and revolutionary experience for years to come? I mean, Super Mario 64 had its moveset, Super Mario Sunshine had Flood, and Super Mario Galaxy had the spin, so what would Odyssey bring to the table? With the conception of Cappy alongside the rest of Nintendo's ideas eventually coming into fruition, Super Mario Odyssey would be born on October 27th of 2017, and the response was simply astounding. Not only did the game encapsulate the attention of those looking to get into the Mario franchise, but it was considered to be a gem to those who have kept up with the Mario series. It was essentially everything that Nintendo could have ever wanted, but to understand why Odyssey is so highly regarded among so many people, we must look at not only the game itself, but how it's impacted the world. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into the world that is Odyssey and truly see what makes this game so perfect, or more so, almost perfect. Upon opening the game, we find ourselves on an airship trying to stop Bowser from kidnapping the one and only Peach. But this time, Bowser isn't just trying to kidnap Peach, he's trying to marry her, as seen with his fancy attire as well as his dialogue. Bowser successfully takes Peach from her castle, and Mario gets knocked off the ship so hard that he wakes up in the Cap Kingdom. After traversing through Cap for a little bit, he meets Cappy, who gives him the ability to not only bounce off of his hat, but the ability to defeat enemies and even capture them. I always thought this start to the game was very special because it not only teased Peach's castle, but to an extent resembled the beginning of Super Mario Galaxy, as in that game there's a similar scene on the airship and it's Rosalina giving Mario special powers as opposed to Cappy. With your newfound powers, you'll find that there's a lot to interact with, even in this kingdom that is supposed to just act as a tutorial. There's secret areas with coins, things you can throw your hat on, and even these random posters that you can knock down. But after you use Cappy to open up this bridge and make your way to the Hat Tower, the game starts to spice up as you're exposed to your first capture. Now you would think that the first capture would be a Goomba or a Koopa Troopa, but it ends up being a fucking frog. I still remember when I first watched this cutscene, I was so confused yet so amazed at the same time, and I think this is the type of feeling that Nintendo was trying to evoke. It was just another example of the game showing to us that we were in for something that was so much more than just your average Mario experience. Once you make it to the end of Cap Kingdom, you are met with the first boss of the game, which is none other than Topper, who is one of the 4 Brutals that you'll encounter throughout the game, or I guess 5 if you count Madame Brutal. While I do believe they could have made the boss fights against the Brutals just a tad more difficult, I do think that they are a nice change of pace when compared to the Koopalings. On top of that, each of the Brutals are uniquely designed, and we see the first instance of that with Topper, in which you are forced to use your newfound moves to defeat him. Now this is where things get real. As you explore the Cascade Kingdom, you'll find yourself collecting power moons for the first time. Some power moons are just way too obvious, but most of them are rewarded to you as a result of your exploration and curiosity, as they'll not only be littered throughout the stage itself, but in these sub areas or even these sections of the stage where you can move Mario around in 2D. Alongside this, you're able to capture a plethora of new enemies, whether it be this golden chain chomp that you use to defeat Madame Brutal, or this fucking dinosaur. But above all, we now know what we must do to defeat Bowser and prosper in the world of Super Mario Odyssey. It's our job to collect moons so that we can power up the Odyssey and ultimately stop Bowser from marrying Peach. Speaking of powering up the Odyssey, once you collect 5 moons in Cascade, you are able to make your way to the Sand Kingdom, which once again scales up this game's experience as there is so much to uncover here. In fact, there is so much to uncover in every kingdom, but I'll get to that later on in the video when I start covering Odyssey's post-game and other details in more detail. For now, let's just continue journeying through the game. As you make your way through the Sand Kingdom, you'll notice that the entire stage is covered with frozen parts, whether it be the abundant amount of icicles or this frozen lake by the oasis. Now this first story moon you collect here is located on top of this tower, which by the way, you are once again able to merge into 2D on this same tower, which I think is a cool touch. After you collect this story moon, you are able to make your way to the next section of the Sand Kingdom where you collect the second story moon. A story moon that requires you to collect 5 moon shards to unlock it. Using this Moai, you are able to reveal hidden paths that lead you to the moon shards that you need. After collecting this story moon, the inverted pyramid is opened up to you, which is, in my eyes, the most unique section in the Sand Kingdom, as this place is littered with secrets, 2D sections, clever moons, and purple coins. Speaking of which, this game has purple coins, which are different from regular coins, as they are exclusive to each kingdom and are later on used to buy stickers, outfits, and even souvenirs, all of which contribute to a 100% completion of this game. Once you make your way up to the top of the tower, 4, you encounter Harriet, who is the second Brutal out of the 4 and will use her bombs alongside her hair to try and murder you. Once you defeat Harriet, the genius of this kingdom really begins to shine as day turns to night and you are met with this plot twist of events. The inverted pyramid rises, mummies begin to appear everywhere, and you even unlock this hidden part of the Sand Kingdom. This hidden part, of course, being this underground section that you are able to explore, and once you make it far enough, you'll find yourself in this area, which is arguably one of the most iconic areas in the game. I say this because if you happen to have explored the more advanced mechanics of this game before landing in this area, you'll be able to not only find hidden coins on these pillars, but a massive coin stack, which is even harder to get. This is iconic because this is one of those rare instances where Nintendo is rewarding you for not only exploration, but for having a grip on the game's mechanics. It's that mentality of, hey, even though this area doesn't have much merit and is rather inaccessible, if someone does find a way to get up to this area, then we will reward their efforts, which in my eyes is just brilliant. It's one of the many ways that Nintendo is able to reward their less casual audience without removing the accessibility the game offers to newer players. Alongside that, this area is where you fight Knuckletech, which is nothing like what we've seen in other Mario games. In fact, a lot of the bosses in this game are a nice change of pace from what we are conditioned to seeing in these games, and I'd say the Knuckletech fight is the first example of a boss fight that exudes this uniqueness. He'll start off the fight by hurling his fists at you before inevitably punching the ice, allowing for you to capture his hand and use it almost like a bullet bill to sock him in the face. As the fight progresses, he'll of course become more aggressive, whether it be throwing his fists across the entire arena or slamming his hands on the ground in an effort to hit you with these icicles. Once you complete the third phase of the fight, he vanishes from thin air, and you are left with not only a multi-moon, but world peace in the Sand Kingdom. As you continue to embark on your odyssey, you are given a choice as to which kingdom you go to next. While this pitchfork in the road doesn't seem too significant, your choice will actually impact you later on, as the kingdoms these paintings lead to will actually be altered, and the same can be said for when you have to choose between Snow and Seaside Kingdom. Anyways, let's dive into Lake Kingdom, shall we? At first glance, this seems like your ordinary water level, and in a lot of ways it is. However, there are some very distinctive parts of this kingdom that are seamlessly integrated in. Whether it be this underwater city that's home to the people of Lake Lamode, or these walls that you can quite literally zip open, this kingdom is a prime example of Nintendo using every nook and cranny to the player's advantage, as it makes a kingdom that is otherwise rather small feel grand, given these distinctive parts alongside the design of the lake itself as everything functions around it. Speaking of which, once you make your way through the lake and into the underwater plaza, you'll be able to make your way up to this arena where you will encounter the third Brutal, or technically the fourth Brutal if you decide to go to Wooded Kingdom first. Unimportant shit aside, I think Rango is a good and subtle increase in difficulty to that of Topper and Harriet, at least in theory. Using Rango's hat, you are able to float onto his head, and from there he'll transform into his hat and chase you around the arena. However, it is very easy to cheese this fight, as all it takes is a jump and a dive to hit his head, and you can even jump on his hat while he's chasing you to negate that phase as well. Now, I'm well aware that you can also cheese the other Brutal fights, but in my opinion, I feel as if the Rango fight is the only instance where cheesing the fight actually just negates the fight's inherent purpose and concepts. Regardless, I'm not too concerned about details like that, as it is very minute in the grand scheme of things. Now, despite conflicting beliefs and opinions, Wooded Kingdom might just be one of, if not the best kingdoms in the entire game. As you land, you find yourself in the middle of this forest with not much in sight, but once you make your way through the Sphinx, you are exposed to the world that is Steam Gardens. As you make your way up Steam Gardens, you'll of course encounter this massive piranha plant that will give you your first story moon, but you'll also encounter this tiny maze, some tricky collectibles, and literal garden paths that will connect you to different parts of the stage. After getting your first story moon, you'll be able to access this tower in which you use these uproots to traverse through, and once you make it to the top, you are able to fight Spirit. Considering my coverage of the last three Brutals, there's not all too much to say about Spirit, as he's a pretty simple boss fight. Just make sure to dodge his poison attacks and maybe even compliment his fit. Now, if you fall off the stage at any point, you won't just respawn back at the last checkpoint with 10 lost coins. Instead, you'll land in this gloomy and dark forest with no map of it in sight. This is where the brilliance of Wooded Kingdom comes to fruition. You see, Nintendo is fully aware that at some point we will make a mistake, meaning that the discovery of the deep woods is almost inevitable. Despite this inevitability, the deep woods remains as a clever secret until it is revealed to you one way or another. The only way out of the deep woods are these beanstalks that you can grow with these nuts, but if you choose to explore the deep woods, you will find many collectibles and even another dinosaur. While this is what lies below, you will also have to make it to the top of the Wooded Kingdom if you want to achieve world peace and ultimately stop Torque Drift from giving Bowser his flowers. Speaking of which, once you use these tanks to get the story moon, you'll be able to fight Torque Drift, which is once again another distinct boss. Using this uproot, you are able to hit Torque Drift's weak spot, but in order to do this, you must dodge his lasers and hit his orbs, which are covered in these gray blocks. Not only does this create an epic boss fight, but it forces you to learn how to use the uproot to its full potential. Whether it be this boss fight, the deep woods, or just the atmosphere, this kingdom is definitely my favorite in Super Mario Odyssey. But trust me, there is a lot more to unpack because we're only 5 kingdoms in after all. Once you get enough moons to fuel the Odyssey and leave Wooded Kingdom, you make your way over to the Metro Kingdom. At least that's what the game tricks you into believing, as you actually encounter Bowser's airship while on the Odyssey before ultimately brawling him in the Cloud Kingdom in what is known as the Nimbus Arena. Now, the Cloud Kingdom itself is pretty lackluster, even when it comes to post-game, as the entire kingdom consists of just this arena alongside a few post-game sub-areas. This is also the case when it comes to the Ruined Kingdom, but I'll talk about that later on in the video. Missed potential aside, the Bowser boss fight itself is simply put very badass. Despite Bowser remaining a pretty consistent boss fight throughout the franchise, Mario Odyssey actually manages to make Bowser feel like a new and refreshing boss fight. Instead of the gimmick behind Bowser being his flames, it's his hat, which he will propel at you. Funnily enough, Bowser's own weapon is what defeats him in the end, as you are able to take control of Bowser's hat and punch him in the nuts. Once you defeat Bowser, you are once again met with a roadblock as you end up in the Lost Kingdom, as opposed to Metro as a result of Bowser's cannonballs. Despite this kingdom serving as an intermission between the greater kingdoms of Wooded and Metro, it is surprisingly memorable, at least in my opinion, given all its little quirks and assets. I still remember being so excited to finally make it to the Metro Kingdom, given how hyped up it was before the game's release, only to be disappointed that I was in Lost Kingdom. However, this disappointment was immediately reversed when I started exploring what the kingdom had to offer. Now, of course, the kingdom starts off by having Klepto take Cappy. While it's rather easy to defeat Klepto, it's still a very nice touch that they decided to bring him back from Super Mario 64. Once you get Cappy, there isn't really any clear objective other than collecting the required amount of moons, which encourages you to explore. Furthermore, this kingdom is a very unique spin on the typical poison level, given the aforementioned quirks and assets, whether it be this humid and tropical forest, the Tribeetles and Wigglers, or even these strange stairs. But despite Lost Kingdom's charm, there is little that can compare to what's next. Now, remember when I said that Wooded Kingdom was my favorite kingdom? Well, when it comes to level design, Wooded would indeed hold that title for me, but Metro Kingdom might just have to take the title for the best kingdom, period. But what makes New Donk City so iconic after all? Well, when you finally land into the city, you are met with the kingdom being in a state of disaster. Enemies have infiltrated the street, the city hall is under attack, and there's a giant robotic wiggler at the top of the city. Despite a lot of the city being blocked off, there is still so much to uncover, whether it be the abundant amount of collectibles or the subtle Easter eggs that are scattered throughout the city. Once you make it to the city hall, you are met with a rather challenging climb, as you have to maneuver your way up these poles without getting hit by these mini Goombas piranhas or the bugs. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say bugs? What I meant to say was urban sting bees. Yes, that is what they are actually called. Anyways, once you make your way through the city hall, you are able to capture the spark pylon that takes you all the way up to the top where you face off against the Mecha Wiggler. Now, if you have any experience blowing up taxis with the tanks, then you will have no problem blowing up the Mecha Wiggler, but the fight itself is actually hidden with complexity. The fight is broken up into 3 phases, all of which involve shooting the Mecha Wiggler. However, Nintendo will reward you for skilled play, as quick and accurate aim with the tank will allow you to defeat the Mecha Wiggler in just 2 phases. Now, the first phase is relatively simple, but the second phase is where the hidden complexity lies, as the formation of the Wiggler on this building is actually random. Sometimes, the Wiggler will present itself in a way where it's very easy to defeat, while other times, it will overlap on itself, making it significantly more difficult to hit. While the Mecha Wiggler seems like a very odd boss fight, especially within the context of a Mario game, it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because it perfectly complements the buildings around it and even encapsulates the tone and atmosphere of Night Metro. That is why when you defeat the Mecha Wiggler and grab the Story Moon, the gloominess of the city wears off, and you are met with an illuminated and gleaming city. The masterpiece that is Metro Kingdom is finally revealed to you, and you are met with even more to explore alongside a set of tasks to complete. Coincidentally enough, your first task is to talk to Pauline, who is not only the mayor of New Donk City, but a returning character that the Mario franchise had not seen for years upon years. Considering the death of the Mecha Wiggler, Pauline wants to celebrate by throwing a festival, so she asks you to bring the 4 musicians to help aid with her musical performance. As you make your way to each musician, you may or may not notice the sheer amount of things that you can not only do, but see. Every building is able to be climbed, certain areas reference past Mario titles, whether it be this area that includes the first level from Super Mario Bros, or the streets and signs that pay homage to Donkey Kong, and you're even able to ride on these goofy scooters. Just make sure that there isn't a Tyrannosaurus Rex chasing after you. After you gather Pauline's backup musicians, she then informs you about how the underground power plant is out of commission, meaning that there isn't enough power to supply Pauline's festival. So in typical New York fashion, she decides to send you into the sewers so that you can put the power plant back into commission. But in order to power the power plant, you must defeat the plants that have been planted in the power plant. While this small part of the city doesn't seem significant, there is one subtle yet shocking realization that only some players will pick up on. As we all know, moons have been the sole reason that we've been able to make our way through all of these kingdoms. But to the people of Mario Odyssey, power moons are quite literally just a source of renewable energy, which is exemplified with the hundreds of moons that are flowing through the plant. This feels wrong. You're led to believe that these power moons are the most valuable collectible, but in reality, they are simply just a necessity when it comes to getting by in the world of Mario Odyssey, for better or for worse. This is later emphasized with the copious amounts of moons that are able to be collected as a result of the moon cubes that appear in each kingdom after you beat the game. Moons are not special, they are fuel. While the moons may not be canonically special, Pauline's festival has got to take the cake for one of the most special parts of the entire game. Whether it be the Donkey Kong styled level or Pauline's song, the festival experience is one that Nintendo makes sure you don't forget. I mean, just listen to the performance. While Metro Kingdom is a pipe dream that I could endlessly roam around in, the journey must go on. Upon entering the Odyssey, we are once again met with another pitchfork in the road. Let's start off by talking about Snow Kingdom first. This kingdom is definitely more classic and traditional, especially in comparison to something like Metro Kingdom. However, this traditional style actually works very well for this kingdom, as there are plenty of unique ideas that are cleverly woven in. You arrive in the Snow Kingdom in the midst of a snowstorm, but once you jump in the magic hole, you are exposed to the town of Shiveria, which is comprised comprised of 4 challenges that you must complete, as well as the Shivarians themselves. I mean, just look at how big and nice they are. Once you complete the 4 challenges, which by the way, one of the challenges involves refighting Rango, you unlock the lower half of Shiveria, in which you compete in the Bound Bowl Grand Prix, which is a race that is thrown together by the Shivarians. Now, of course, Mario wouldn't stand a chance against the Shivarians, so what better way to compete than becoming a Shivarian? After all, winning the race is the key to preventing Bowser from nabbing his rare and exquisite frosted cake. Then we of course got Seaside Kingdom, which in contrast to the small Snow Kingdom, is a very large level with lots to uncover under the sea. This animated beach is home to the people of Bubble Lane. There's a place to play volleyball, a hot tub to relax in, and plenty of water to swim in. However, the resort has undergone a dark age as Mollis Lanciar, also known as Brigadier Mollis Lanciar, the third Dauphin of Bubble Lane, has invaded the glass palace that lies in the center of the kingdom. While it's no secret that Mario Odyssey is home to a lot of big levels, I feel as if the Seaside Kingdom goes under the radar, as some may perceive it as a typical water world. However, it is so much more than that. There are a diverse amount of locations, from this beach house, the lighthouse, the hot spring island, this rolling canyon, the glass palace, and of course, the underwater trenches. While there are references to past Mario enemies with the inclusion of the eels and Dory from Super Mario 64, there is a plethora of new enemies, with the most impactful one being the Gushin, which you are able to use to reach new places and inevitably fight Mollusk. Speaking of which, once you open the 4 seals, you are able to spray Mollusk, which triggers your battle against him. While this boss wouldn't be the first unique one this game has to offer, it is, in my opinion, the first actually challenging fight. Mollusk has free range to roam around the entire kingdom, meaning that you have to not only traverse through a multitude of obstacles, but manage the amount of water you have when chasing after him, because you will get punished for running out of water while in the air. As the fight progresses, he will not only get stronger, but he will become faster, making him significantly more difficult to spray down. That is why it is crucial that you are not only maximizing the Gushin's potential, but that you are getting your timing down, because otherwise you will be stuck chasing Mollusk. Not only is it nice and refreshing to get a more difficult boss fight, but I personally think that it is very smart that they decided to utilize the entire kingdom as your fighting arena, as it fits Mollusk very well. Once you defeat Mollusk, the glass palace is restored and you are able to make your way to the Luncheon Kingdom. This kingdom is very eccentric even upon just arriving at it. Combining your lava theme level with food themes was simply just an amazing idea, as it creates such a rich atmosphere. There's forks that you can capture, corn that you could walk on, and even turnips that you can throw into pots for moons. So not only does the food create this distinct atmosphere, but the food actually has functionality and serves as way more than just a nice touch. I mean, even the first story moon involves you capturing this pan bro to break open these cheese blocks so that you can access this lever, and the town itself, also known as Peronza Plaza, is very lively. Furthermore, the colors of this kingdom complement each other so well, despite them not being so typical, which only exemplifies this warm atmosphere. After you collect the first story moon, you are able to make it atop this area where you are forced to capture this literal piece of meat so that you are able to get this multi-moon. Once you do this, you are kicked off from the top of Mount Volcano as a result of this bird, otherwise known as Cookatiel. Somehow, Mario is able to survive not only this drastic fall, but all of the other falls he has taken. I mean, how in the fuck was Mario hurt when Bowser knocked him off his airship, but he was completely fine when he got knocked back all the way to the start of the Luncheon Kingdom? Anyways, once you're done capturing meat and getting flung off of volcanoes, you are tasked with making it back up to the top of the volcano and defeating Cookatiel. One thing that I haven't even mentioned yet is the fact that there is such a nice dichotomy between both linear and non-linear paths in this game. On one hand, there's a linear path to make it to Cookatiel. You venture your way to this cave, you use the lava bubbles to make your way through the cave, and then you climb up the mountain. On the other hand, you are able to escape this linear path at any moment and find a multitude of other areas to explore, whether it be this magma swamp, this cheese rock room, or even this mountain that is filled to the brim with forks. This same dichotomy is present within almost every single kingdom and is especially apparent in bigger kingdoms such as Wooded, Sand, and Metro. Not only does this dichotomy add to the immersion of worlds, but it gives the player that freedom to make the choices they want to make and encourages them to use their imagination when it comes to navigating each and every world. Once you make it up to Cookatiel, you'll have to steer your way through this big pot of soup and wait for the right moment to hit Cookatiel. While the fight starts off pretty tame, it can get rather intense as Cookatiel increases the amount of projectiles he launches at you and even makes it harder for you to climb up this pink liquid he gushes out of his mouth. Surprisingly enough, the design for this boss fight is actually inspired by this bird that first appeared in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and Cookatiel would later on be featured in the Nintendo Switch version of the game. Now, just when you think that you're finally going to face off against Bowser and defeat him, he pulls out a fucking dragon and blasts you all the way to the Ruined Kingdom, which has gotta be one of the biggest plot twists in all of Mario history. In fact, this may be the only time we ever see a boss fight like this, as it is just so out of left field for Nintendo to integrate a boss fight like this into their game. Speaking of which, let's talk about the dragon himself. You'll notice that throughout the Ruined Kingdom, there will be these little swords that you can throw Cappy on. These same swords are attached to the head of the dragon as a means of protecting its weak spot. Yet somehow, someway, all it takes is 3 ground pounds to defeat this gigantic fucking dragon. But these ground pounds are not without their challenges, as the dragon will threaten you with its purple electricity. Not only does the dragon breathe this electricity into the arena, but its entire head will turn electric if you don't act quick enough. While this fight may be the most random thing the world has ever seen, I can't deny the amount of happiness I felt when I fought this dragon for the first time. Now, this next kingdom is one that is very special. This kingdom would of course be Bowser's Kingdom, which is really just a sight to behold. This kingdom is special because this is not the ordinary design we see when it comes to Bowser's castle. Instead of his castle being your typical lava-filled abode, it is a lush and Japanese-inspired castle that features a garden, a tea house, and even these statues. While this steps outside of the norm for what Bowser's castle is, I personally think that it is very genius of them to design the kingdom like this, as it feels more representative of what Bowser actually is in this game. Beforehand, Bowser was just kind of seen as a menace, and we didn't have much insight into his personality, at least in the mainline Mario games. While Bowser is still a menace here, we actually get to see his personality shine throughout the game, because his motives this time are to marry Peach as opposed to just kidnapping her to kidnap her. This is part of the reason why I believe the kingdom is so representative of Bowser, as it actually feels like Bowser's castle. From the statues to the walls and even the music, this actually comes off as Bowser's home as opposed to just a menacing castle. And what's even cooler is that Bowser's personality in this game is expanded upon in the Mario movie. Once you get to traveling through the kingdom, you are of course met with story moons to collect as you make it to the final part of Bowser's castle, but you may notice that this level is the most linear out of any of the other kingdoms we've seen thus far, with the exception of Cap, Ruined, and Cloud Kingdom, as you are basically just traveling from island to island. While a linear level design can serve as a detriment, it actually fits very well in this case, as the game wants you to have a sense of urgency to make it to the end of Bowser's castle and saves the exploration aspects until post-game. Speaking of which, you are first tasked with collecting these moon shards with the help of these Pokeos that you can capture. After that, you are met with a rematch against Topper and Harriet, both of which are stronger than before, given the fact that Topper has a ridiculous amount of hats, while Harriet has more bombs to hurl at you. However, the real challenge of this castle starts to ensue after you defeat the two Brutals, as you are tasked with climbing up this steep wall with the Pokeo before eventually encountering what might possibly be the most creative boss fight in this entire game. While the Brutals may not be an extraordinary concept when looking at each individual one, calling the Mecha Brutal an extraordinary idea would simply just be an understatement. All 4 of them team up to control different parts of this gigantic contraption they've put together, and if you want any chance of taking the Brutals down, you need to not only poke these bombs at it using the Pokio, but you need to scale the Mecha Brutal and break all 4 of its bubbles. Now of course the fight starts off with the bombs being the only real threat, but as the fight progresses, it gets surprisingly challenging, whether it be the plethora of obstacles or the fact that the Mecha Brutal will start vigorously running around. Not only is the boss fight itself very innovative, but is one of the many things that exemplifies that surprise element I talked about earlier in the video. Even if you were to have guessed that all 4 of the Brutals would team up, there would have been absolutely no way you would have been able to predict that they would team up like this. Although this game loves to surprise you, there is something that you are able to predict, and that is the kingdom that comes after you defeat the Mecha Brutal. This would be none other than the Moon Kingdom, the kingdom in which you are able to finally defeat Bowser and beat the base game. Despite the kingdom being foreshadowed all throughout the game, whether it be through the cutscenes where Bowser's airship is heading to the moon, or through the dialogue itself, the actual kingdom left me flabbergasted upon arriving in it for the first time. From the moon gravity to the moon cave, there is just so much to process. While there isn't too much to explore on the surface of Moon Kingdom pre-post game, the Moon Cave makes up for that exploration aspect and even exudes that final Mario level type feel that more traditional players might have been longing for, given the linear design, the threatening enemies, and of course the lava. Speaking of which, once you make your way up to the end of the cave, you are met with an even harder version of Madame Brood. In my humble opinion, this fight isn't anything too special, but what is special is the sequence of events that comes after you exit the Moon Cave. As you enter the church, you walk in on Bowser and Peach getting married, but thankfully, you came just in time to halt the marriage ceremony and defeat Bowser. Despite this boss fight being the same idea as the one in Cloud Kingdom, it felt a lot more intense. The difficulty of the fight does increase as Bowser has more moves, but just knowing that you're closing in on the end of the game is enough to amplify my emotions. But what really got not only me, but a lot of people in their feelings was what happened after you defeated Bowser. Just when you think you are finally reunited with Peach, these moon rocks drop from the sky, and next thing you know you're capturing Bowser, busting pillars down, traversing through 2D sections, and while it's all happening, this masterpiece of a song is playing. Well, congratulations! You've made it this far in the video. Now we still got post-game to cover, as well as a bunch of other things to talk about that you are not going to want to miss. But if you're enjoying the video so far, then make sure to grab some motherfucking snacks if you haven't already, and any comments, likes, and subs are always appreciated. Now the Mushroom Kingdom is simply just amazing. Obviously, there is plenty of Super Mario 64 references to notice, whether it be Yoshi's appearance on top of the castle, the paintings scattered throughout the stage, the draining of the water, or just the fucking castle itself. But outside of these obvious references, there were a lot more subtle ones, whether it be this tree from Super Mario 3D Land, or this island that pays tribute to Super Mario World. Not only are the references very heartwarming, but the inclusion of the Mushroom Kingdom was a very genius way of Nintendo introducing you to post-game. After all, it's a satisfying end to your journey, except the only problem is that this isn't the end of your journey. Now there's no doubt that this game is a work of art. From the intricacies of its game design to its warm atmosphere, it is safe to assume that this is by far one of Nintendo's greatest games. But every work of art is not without its flaws, so before I go on to gush about this game, I think it's only fair that I address a few issues I personally have with Odyssey. This first, and in my opinion, biggest issue being the post-game. Now there is a lot to unpack when it comes to post-game, which is why it would only be unfair if I were to say that all of post-game is bad, because it is not by any means. But the fact that there is so much to unpack is sort of where my issue with a lot of the post-game stems from in the first place. With the exception of the Mushroom Kingdom, alongside the 2 kingdoms you unlock after it, a moon cube will spawn in every single kingdom, which will in turn give you more moons to collect in each kingdom. While a lot of these moons do add to the overall experience, whether it be the Koopa freerunning challenges that incentivize you to push your skills to the absolute limit, or the creative sub-areas that take advantage of certain captures and mechanics, a lot of these moons, at least in my eyes, feel like filler. It can be cool to find a moon just out in the open or even underground, but when this starts to become a pattern that can be seen in almost every single kingdom, then the collection of moons starts to feel dull. But even then, this can be excused as you are given 2 primary post-game objectives outside of 100%ing the game. The first objective is to get 250 moons, which, considering the fact that it only takes 124 moons to complete the game, this is not a large feat. However, the objective that comes after this is collecting 500 moons, which will unlock the final kingdom in the game. So while some moons may feel a bit dull, these objectives still provide value to your ventures. However, the dullness of some moons can most certainly not be forgiven after you beat the final kingdom, as your reward for collecting all 880 unique moons alongside getting every purple coin, costume, souvenir, and more is simply just a hat on the top of Mushroom Kingdom, a star on your profile, and a Bowser refight. That is it. While there are plenty of small things they could have done to fix this, the biggest and most obvious fix would have been to just lock the final kingdom behind the 100% requirement, because then that way, the overabundance of collectibles would have had more value in the end. Moreover, ending off with the final and most difficult kingdom in the game would have just made sense. I mean, just imagine if you were able to unlock the perfect run in Super Mario Galaxy 2 after collecting just 200 stars instead of after collecting every star. What would have been a satisfying end to a long journey becomes a goose chase for these 3 purple coins you might have missed on the edge of the map, or that one obscure moon that doesn't add much to the player experience. So as crazy as it sounds, there's simply just too much to collect in this game. While I do prefer too much content over not enough content, the overabundance of collectibles personally discouraged me from 100%ing the game for a very long time, as I was satisfied with my completion of the final kingdom alongside the 600 to 700 moons I had in my arsenal. Speaking of which, let's talk about those final 2 kingdoms. The first kingdom out of the 2 is the Dark Side, which is a small area filled with moon gravity, bunnies, and hint arts. However, the crux of this kingdom lies within the gargantuan tower in which you refight all of the Brutals and even the Mecha Brutal. Not only do you have to deal with the challenge of moon gravity, but you have to do all of this without dying, as there are no checkpoints provided to you. While the Mecha Brutal utilizes the Hammer Bro over the Pokyo, the rest of the boss fights are simply just rehashes of what we've already seen. While I don't mind the refight with the Mecha Brutal, the refight against the other Brutals just becomes repetitive, considering you've already fought each one twice. On top of this, the Dark Side, at least in my opinion, features way too many hint arts. While I think hint arts offer some of the most creative puzzle solving this game has to offer, I like the way they were scarce throughout the game, as they felt more unique and special that way. So when the game throws a solid 20 of them at you, all at once, those hint arts that once felt special diminish in value. The other kingdom, which is unlocked after you collect 500 moons, is the Darker Side, which in contrast to the Dark Side is a very unique, challenging, and rewarding kingdom to complete. You are once again put on this almost extension of the moon, but once you enter this pipe, you are exposed to this linear level that is filled to the brim with threats and obstacles. You must swing from pole to pole, jump from hole to hole, and execute to your highest potential. You have to use this uproot, Yoshi, the Pokyo, Glidon, and even these scarecrows if you want a chance at beating this monstrosity. While there will be some help offered to you along the way, alongside some easy skips that you can pull off to cut significant chunks of the level, the Darker Side is satisfying to complete and serves as a true test of the player's skill. Even the climbing of the tower at the end is satisfying, as the tedious climb up feels worth it in the end when you finally collect that multi-moon. While I've stated my distaste for the excessive quantity of collectibles, there is another problem that I have with this game, and that is its missed potential. While there is always potential to improve improve a game, I feel as if there are some obvious places in which Odyssey could have definitely expanded. I mean, just look no further than Cloud and Ruined Kingdom. While both of these kingdoms do feature post-game content, this content doesn't really change how you interact with the kingdom itself, as you are either taken to a sub-area or you are given moons that are not too far out of reach. If we look at the Cloud Kingdom, all we really have to explore outside of the sub-areas is the Nimbus Arena and the very small platforms that are on the outskirts of it. It's very clear that they could have done so much more with this kingdom, whether it be creating some sort of cloud town or even just having more clouds to jump on. The same can be said for Ruined Kingdom. I mean, just think about how cool it would have been if Ruined Kingdom was a fully fledged out level. The dragon boss fight was a treat on its own, so the amount of potential to design a level around it could have been huge, especially considering the fact that unlike the Cloud Kingdom, there's actually a strong, distinct, and coherent theme to go off of. Ruined Kingdom had the potential to be one of, if not the best kingdoms in the entire game, but instead, it merely serves as a fighting arena for the dragon. Even if it makes sense to just fight the dragon in the base game, just think about how cool it would have been to have this level expanded upon once you inevitably return to it. My final issue with the post-game is the achievement system. If you're not familiar with this system, it is a system in which Toadette will reward you with moons upon completing certain achievements, such as jumping a certain amount of times or cat throwing a certain amount of times. While I feel this system works really well on paper, its execution left a poor taste in my mouth, as I'd be talking to Toadette for what felt like eons upon collecting these achievement moons. This is because a lot of the achievements will be things that you will have naturally already done as a result of just playing the game. The fact that these achievements are almost a subconscious bystander to the game itself speaks volumes to the actual merit of achieving these achievements. I mean, sure, some of them could be satisfying and even challenging, but for the most part, they are monotonous. Therefore, this system, which otherwise would have worked really well, just ends up being a dull part of the game considering the achievements you are presented with. While the game has elements of post-game that, in my opinion, negatively affect the player's experience, there is one complexity within the game that works both to its advantage as well as its detriment. This complexity would be the fact that this game appeals to both the casual and non-casual audience. Now, like I mentioned earlier on in the video, there are plenty of instances where this appeal works to the game's advantage. However, this same appeal is to the detriment of the game, as it's filled to the brim with compromises, and as a wise person once said, a good compromise is a compromise in which both parties are not fully satisfied. I mean, 2 out of my 3 issues with the post-game can be explained within this complexity. If you look at the Toadette achievements, you can see that the idea of even having achievements is catered towards that non-casual audience, as it gives dedicated players something to work towards after completing the game. On the other hand, the easiness of these achievements caters towards the casual audience, because otherwise, this amount of achievements would simply just be overbearing. The same can be said with the abundant number of moons you're able to collect, as dedicated players will want to collect all of them for 100% completion, while the casual audience won't feel overwhelmed 100% in the game when they realize that a lot of the moons are already at their disposal. So while I do believe that these are some very real flaws within the game, I can't exactly blame Nintendo for most of it, as this appeal to both audiences is what ultimately allowed the game to reach so many people. There's a reason as to why this is one of the best-selling Mario games of all time, which is why I call this appeal to both audiences a complexity as opposed to a flaw. While there may be some other small flaws here and there, the fact that this game is able to hold up so well despite these flaws is truly a testament to how well Odyssey was designed, which leads me to why I think the game itself is near perfection. First and foremost, Odyssey presents you with a beautiful sense of freedom. Despite each kingdom having story moons, your only true means of progressing through the game is by collecting the allocated amount of moons in each kingdom, meaning that for the most part, you can tackle these story missions whenever you want to. This freedom is part of the reason as to why Mario Odyssey works so well as an open world game. The player has that choice as to whether they want to follow the game's linear path or explore what else each kingdom has to offer. before tackling the story objectives. Furthermore, everything within each kingdom is connected to each other, which further elaborates this immersion within the open world. When you collect a moon, a 4-second animation will play, and before you know it, you'll be back to exploring, as opposed to Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Sunshine, in which you are kicked out of the level. This system of non-stop moon collection works very well in Odyssey's case, as it allows for the player to become more enthralled within each of the individual worlds, and ultimately, you are left with a sense of satisfaction. Speaking of satisfaction, the game provides you with all types of incentives to keep your journey refreshing. While your incentives to make your way through the base game are exploration and progression, the post-game's incentives not only amplify these already existing incentives, but add new ones to the list as well. You have a load of mini-games to tackle, whether it be the aforementioned Koopa freerunning challenges, or even these bound bolt races. There's of course new moons to collect, but alongside that, you are able to obtain more purple coins, unlock more secrets, and explore for hours upon hours. I mean, if you just take a look at the map of each kingdom, you'll be guided to all types of incentives to tackle. Outside of these incentives, the post-game offers a lot of sub-areas, and while the abundance of them may pose as controversial to some, I personally loved exploring each and every sub-area. It felt nice to break my immersion within a kingdom every once in a while and discover a completely different challenge to tackle. While some sub-areas are able to be accessed through your simple door or pipe, others require you to complete a certain objective or even have a certain costume, which I think is a nice touch. Moreover, if you tackle enough of these sub-areas, you'll start to notice a pattern within them. While there is a moon that you can collect at the end of each sub-area, there will always be a secret moon rewarded to you, whether it be through your exploration or through the application of certain concepts. Oh yeah, Balloon World also exists. While the game design and exploration is something that I could endlessly talk about, there is one thing that I haven't touched on yet, and this is how Super Mario Odyssey breaks the cycle. If you look all the way back to the beginning of Mario's conception, you'll notice that patterns within the games begin to evolve rather rapidly. Once Super Mario Bros. For the NES launches, it is met with success that most game developers at the time couldn't even dream of achieving. Therefore, Nintendo continues to expand on the franchise with the release of the Lost Levels, the second and third game, and then of course the Super Mario Land games and Super Mario World. But when 1996 comes around, Super Mario 64 makes its debut on the Nintendo 64 and breaks the cycle of Mario. Not only is it the first ever 3D Mario game, but it introduces the sandbox style, as each of the levels within the castle walls are open worlds that you can explore to your heart's content. While some stages are locked behind specific requirements, the order in which the stars are collected within each level can, for the most part, be entirely up to you. Another 6 years goes by and we once again see this formula broken again with the launch of Super Mario Sunshine on the GameCube. While the core objective is to once again rescue Peach, this game takes many turns as every level is themed around this resort being Delfino Plaza. And you even have FLUDD to accompany you, which not only spices up your moveset, but the design of the game itself. But when the mid to late 2000s rolled around, Mario would really start to take off, as we saw both revelations in the 2D and 3D Mario franchises. With the release of the DS, the new Super Mario Bros. Franchise would be born, which was Nintendo's way of both pouring more passion into the 2D Mario games, but their way of appealing to mass audiences once more. But on the other side of that coin, we have the birth of Super Mario Galaxy, which once again revolutionized the series with its iconic atmosphere. Not only was the space-filled journey one that left me and many others with a strong sense of nostalgia and joy, but it was also Nintendo's first good attempt at crafting an actual plot. Once Bowser kidnaps Peach, you come in contact with both Rosalina and the Lumas, who aid you in saving the universe, and before you know it, you're inside the library of the Comet Observatory, reading Rosalina's storybook. Everything from the variety in levels, the music, the story, and even the tone is what helped make Super Mario Galaxy the game it is today, and is yet another example of a Mario game breaking the cycle. But after 2007, we wouldn't really see another Mario game with this level of innovation and new ideas. This isn't to say that we didn't see amazing new entries to the series, whether it be Super Mario Galaxy 2 or Super Mario 3D Land and World, but none of these games, at least in my eyes, broke the cycle like the other ones did. I mean, all the games that came after New Super Mario Bros. Were fun, but once you got to the 4th New Super Mario Bros. In a row, it starts to become dull. And while Super Mario Galaxy 2 is one of my favorite Mario games, at the end of the day, it was a sequel to Super Mario Galaxy. While you could say that Super Mario 3D Land is unique in its own right, there weren't really any groundbreaking mechanics or ideas that were introduced in the game, which I don't blame them, as it would be insanely difficult to surpass what Super Mario Galaxy did. But when October of 2017 came around, Super Mario Odyssey would not only break the cycle, but it would surpass everything that came before it. Odyssey not only took the iconic parts of the games that came before it, whether it be the sandbox style of levels in Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine, or the charming personality and story that we saw in Super Mario Galaxy. The game, of course, took some of Mario's moves from the past games, but it of course expanded upon the moves to make it feel like no other Mario game. While Peach is once again getting kidnapped, your responsibility is to collect a souvenir from each kingdom in an attempt to thwart Bowser from collecting them for his wedding. This storyline isn't something that will have me rethinking my entire life, but it's something that can stand alone, something that is different and captivating. Outside of that, your ability to interact with the people within each respective level is stronger than ever before. You can talk to the people of Lake Lamode, Shiveria, Tostarena Town, or even this man in New Donk City who will give you a moon for sitting on the bench with him. And of course, there is that element of surprise that I've been bringing up throughout this video. When you travel from kingdom to kingdom, you'll never truly know what you're going to get next, and within each kingdom, you'll find all sorts of surprises. But above all, this game has left a long-lasting impact on not only me, but millions of other people. Given the amazing community this game has fostered, not only have people grown to love it for all of the aforementioned points I've made thus far, but they have taken this already amazing game and crafted it into something that is so much more. I mean, just take a look at all of the amazing mods that have been created, whether it be new kingdoms, online multiplayer, or even a hide and seek mode. All of these mods offer an alternative way of playing the game, and they make for some amazing YouTube content. But what made the game very special to me was speedrunning. Now, I have entire videos on both how speedrunning this game changed my life, as well as a world record progression on Odyssey, but to keep things simple, the speedruns for this game are insane. While the average playthrough of this game takes hours upon hours, Tyrone18 is able to complete the entire game in 56 minutes and 41 seconds. Not only does Tyrone take advantage of Mario's moveset in every way possible, but he pulls off some absurd tricks, whether it be using this platform to clip out of bounds, a well-timed backflip and cap throw that allows for you to skip sections of the Wooded Kingdom, or even this out of bounds clip that you can do with the fucking fish. This world record is nothing short of impressive, as it is the amalgamation of what the community has strived to achieve over the last 6 years, as is the collection of mods that have been made alongside all of the content surrounding both speedrunning, non-vanilla play, and everything else in between. It's one thing for a game to be good, but it's another for the game to change lives, and when I look at Super Mario Odyssey and how it's impacted both me as well as those around me, it's safe to say that the game has changed many lives. Super Mario Odyssey's ability to not only break away from the conventions of Mario while simultaneously keeping that traditional feel alongside the vast amount of possibilities that lie within the game is what makes it so perfect to me. While I long for the times I first played through Super Mario Galaxy or Super Mario 64, I have never sunk so many hours into a game as I've had with Super Mario Odyssey. While I can quite literally go on for hours and hours upon every little detail in this game, I can only hope that I was able to convey most of what I feel in what is now a 16-page script. Sure, Odyssey has its flaws, but is it still a game that holds up 6 years later? Well, I'd say the answer is yes, because I'd be surprised if it didn't hold up for at least another decade.